Tom Cott.
Thank you, Chairman Booker. Policing is on the minds of many Americans today. It's on their minds because of the relentless coverage of some high-profile situations. But unfortunately, that coverage often includes falsehoods, which can be incendiary and, if repeated often enough, can do significant damage or something that no mere retraction can correct. There's another reason that many Americans have policing on their minds today. Last year, our nation experienced the single largest increase in murders ever recorded, shocking 25% surge nationwide. In big cities, it was even worse. Murders rose in Chicago by 65%, in New York City by 58%, and in Washington, D.C. by 40%. Major cities additionally suffered the largest rise in aggravated assaults in 3 decades. American families and communities also watched in horror as drug overdose deaths rose to the highest level ever in their tragic history of addiction. 88,000 Americans died in just the last 12 months alone from drug overdoses. And our country also experienced hundreds of violent riots last year that inflicted billions of dollars in damages and wounded more than 2,000 law enforcement officers. Policing is a dangerous and difficult profession. It often involves individuals, all of whom are imperfect, making split-second decisions with life and death consequences. The vast majority of law enforcement interactions involve no use of force. In fact, are cooperative and cordial between law enforcement and citizens. And the vast majority of law enforcement officers are good, brave, selfless individuals, putting their lives on the line every day to protect their communities. They face tight budgets, long hours, and sometimes public ridicule, all because they dedicate their lives to protecting others. Nonetheless, we of course have understandable concerns about how police interact with the public, including with poor communities, minority communities, and individuals with mental health challenges. Given the potential consequences if an interaction goes poorly, it is no surprise that Republicans and Democrats alike are interested in finding ways to improve policing and to improve public safety. But despite bipartisan interest in this issue, we have seen, on occasion, unfortunate partisan divides that have gotten sharper in recent years. There is perhaps no more visible example of this partisan divide than calls to defund the police. Activists and politicians can mean different things when they use that term. Some, including some lawmakers in Congress, have literally called for the abolition of all law enforcement, although many of these same lawmakers and advocates spend enormous sums of money on their own phalanx of private security bodyguards. Abolishing law enforcement is, of course, a foolish idea that no serious person would ever want to see enacted. Others say we shouldn't abolish law enforcement altogether, but that we should simply cut their budgets further and rely more on unarmed social workers or mental health workers to intervene in emergency situations. Now, of course, we need to involve mental health professionals anytime there's a crisis situation or a person can receive treatment from a mental health professional rather than be a subject of our criminal justice system. And we don't need to ask police officers to also function as psychiatrists, doctors, and educators, or to solve every social problem in our society. They are on our streets to enforce our laws and keep our communities safe. And I suspect that most police departments would be glad to have more and better partnerships with mental health providers, as Chairman Booker outlined in some of the letters he introduced. I expect we'll hear more about this in the hearing, and I welcome the opportunity to work with my colleagues in a bipartisan fashion to improve the availability of things like de-escalation training and training on how to recognize and respond to people facing mental health challenges, and to expand partnerships between law enforcement on the one hand and mental and behavioral health providers on the other hand. But the suggestion that mental health professionals can replace the police rather than supplement and support the police is misguided and dangerous. The simple truth is that when law enforcement stands down, when it responds less to what some people would call small or quality of life crimes, or when the police are defunded, all we get is more crime and more violence. So let's be clear, law enforcement is not the enemy We shouldn't try to reduce law enforcement either. Not only can the police prevent additional victims, they can also be the opportunity to connect offenders who suffer from mental illness and addiction with the professionals that can give them the care they need. Almost every day that a police officer puts on their uniform, they help someone on the worst day of that person's life. Our police see the most heart-wrenching tragedies, the most gruesome gore, the most pernicious evils in our society. They are constantly faced with the worst and are always asked to be at their best. As violent crime and lawlessness continues to increase, we need more police, more resources and better training, and yes, more and better partnerships between our police and our behavioral and mental health professionals. So I thank the witnesses for appearing today, and I look forward to hearing their perspectives on this important issue.
Senator Cotton, I'm grateful for those remarks, and I would